Hi, so this is the 4.0 Impact Series, a podcast where we interview C-suite from impactful businesses across the globe that are using technology as a way of, or a means of fighting against real-world issues, namely climate change. Today, I'm delighted to be here with Matthew Sachs, who is COO of Peak Power, a Canadian clean tech business that are in the energy storage sector. So look, Matthew, we'll jump straight in. You'll be able to give much more of a comprehensive overview of yourself and of Peak Power. So look, please jump in and do introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Leighton. I really appreciate the chance to share Peak's story with your audience. So as you mentioned, Peak Power is a Canadian clean tech company. We've been around since 2016 with operations now across North America, Ontario, New York, Massachusetts, and California. We develop solutions that optimize the operation of distributed energy resources. Distributed energy resources, DERs, it's just a fancy term for these assets that we control that use significant amounts of energy. When people talk about distributed energy resources, they typically are referring to battery energy storage, and that's a core part of what we do. But we have a pretty liberal view of what constitutes a distributed energy resource. We think that batteries, of course, are a unique distributed energy resource. Mm-hmm. Solar, especially paired with storage, has a lot of great important qualities. But buildings can be considered distributed energy resource. You can actually manage the load of buildings significantly based off of grid signals, for instance, the price of energy during certain hours. But most importantly, we look at electric vehicles as well. We think they're going to become the most ubiquitous distributed energy resource in the future. If you can take the capacity in the batteries of the fleets of vehicles that are going to be out there by 2030, and you can harness that, you'll be able to compete with natural gas plants and nuclear plants in energy markets. Wow. So what this all comes down to for us is developing a decarbonization platform. What we mean by that is we can go to a host site, a commercial site, an industrial facility, or commercial office building, and come up with a whole plan with them to use these distributed energy resources to help them meet their net zero or ESG targets, or even just economic targets with an environmental benefit. We can quantify that environmental benefit by looking at the real-time grid emission coefficient and report on that, or even optimize based off of both economic and environmental perspectives.
Okay, understood. So in summary, there's a commercial and an environmental impact or benefit of the technology in which you've produced.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll explain it in a couple of different ways. First, to change people's kind of perspective on it. A lot of people talk about the cost of adapting to climate change or the cost of environmental solutions. We're trying to flip that on its head. You can make money while reducing your environmental footprint. So I'll start with a metaphor. The problem facing the grid today, every grid around the world, is that they size all of the infrastructure for moments of peak demand. That's the hottest hours or the coolest hours of the year, maybe even 15 minutes, where everyone is using energy. And then they build even more infrastructure, plus 15% for reliability. So you have a very robust, I would call it an overbuilt grid. Mm-hmm. Imagine if highways were built that way. Similar idea, it's infrastructure. Yeah. What if highways were built with 30 lanes so that you could handle Thanksgiving rush hour traffic, but most of the times the lanes were empty? Of course. So our grid is like that. Our grid has an asset utilization factor of about 20%. meaning 80% of the time it's overbuilt. And in urban areas, it goes down to 10%, meaning 90% of the time it's overbuilt. So again, if you've got this highway and you had big traffic congestion because the highway was built 50 years ago, and you had to build more lanes, and it was going to cost billions of dollars to build more lanes. What if it was cheaper to pay people to work from home, and you could defer the infrastructure investment of building more lanes? This is what distributed energy resources promise. We have this overbuilt grid, and on those hottest hours of the year, they bring out the oldest, most polluting generators. The worst offenders from a pollution perspective are in those peak hours of the year. So what if you could reduce your reliance on those peaker plants, they're called polluting peaker plants, and instead use these distributed energy resources, pay people to use batteries in their buildings, or pay people that have electric vehicles to use the energy in their electric vehicles while it's parked. So our audacious goal is to make power plants obsolete. We think power plants are polluting and they're inefficient, especially these ones that are only turned on for a couple of weeks of the year, in some cases a couple of hours of the year. It's really quite dramatic how the cost curves and the pollution impacts of generation really increase on the margins on those hottest and coldest hours of the year. If you can replace that with clean energy in battery resources, you can truly eliminate peaker power plants. The capacity in these electric vehicles by 2030 is going to be 10 times the capacity of the natural gas fleet today. Wow. So there's a huge opportunity to replace polluting sources of energy during these peak moments with clean energy stored in batteries.
Okay. Well, yeah, audacious is definitely the right choice of words there, and equally ambitious. Look, you know, I for one, I'm very surprised by you know, your analogy made it really simple for me to understand. And when you say like a 30-lane motorway, just for a couple of hours per year, in terms of like peak, you know, when it's its most busiest, it really does crystallize the fact that it's overkill, for want of a better term.
Leighton, let me go a little further there, because there's a mind shift. When people think about energy, they think about conservation and how much energy you use. That's a kilowatt hour metric. That's not the problem facing the grid today. The problem we're facing the grid is a capacity issue of when you're using energy. The problem is everyone wants energy at the same time during those hottest hours. Again, it's a rush hour problem. So it's a problem of balancing supply and demand. And battery energy storage is the first time that you've got this scalable, cost-effective way to store energy. People take it for granted. When you flip a switch, you don't really think about it. That electricity, those electrons are produced in real time. It's a real-time market. So here's another analogy. I'll try and blow your mind with this one. I like to say that battery energy storage is going to change the energy industry in the same way and for the same reasons that refrigeration changed the milk industry. Sit with it for a second. In the old days, you had horse and buggy wagons delivering milk every day. Why? Because it needed to be fresh. There was no way to store it. So you had a distribution channel of a commodity designed for real-time usage. With the advent of refrigeration, you could store the commodity, and that completely changed the distribution channels. So this isn't a peak power thing. This is a global issue, and this change is happening. We are creating cost-efficient ways to store energy, the commodity, and that is dramatically changing the distribution channels, how we buy and sell electricity. So as much as it's an audacious goal, I firmly believe these changes are going to happen. The question is, what role will peak play in making it happen? Peak power is a stakeholder, we're an instigator, we're an give early examples of the technology, but I firmly believe these changes are happening around the world, and we're just trying to be a lever to help accelerate that change.
Understood. Well, look, thank you for that. Look, normally we normally the format of these interviews goes, what is the problem identified? I don't think we necessarily need to talk any more about that, because it's quite obvious. You only have to open the papers, go on a news channel, no matter where you are in the world, there's a global energy crisis, prices are crazy, demand is massively outweighing supply. So I get that. You guys at Peak Power are really building an innovative, I suppose, kind of game-changing solution to that problem. I suppose I think the last point would be, and this is more so for the benefit of a lot of the people that will be listening to this and tuning in. You've not been around for long. It's been fairly meteoric growth. My understanding is you're circa 55 FTEs at the moment. You've received funding from various channels. In the most part, it's been state and like federal funded funding schemes, etc. So talk to us about that. Where you've kind of been, or where you've come from, and where you are now, and maybe where what the next 6 to 12 months looks like.
Yeah, Leighton, I will say we've had a little bit of a unique journey, and with, not uncommon with startups, a bit of luck involved as well. When we started, one of our first seed investors was a company called Osmington Inc. You wouldn't have heard of them, but it's the family office of David Thompson. David Thompson is the chairman of Thomson Reuters, the media empire. It's a $50 billion family office, the wealthiest Canadian family office. We were one of their first non-real estate investments. And it changed the trajectory of Peak right from the start. They loan money and have relationships with building owners and REITs. Those are our target customers. So instead of going around and going to trade shows, trying to sell to building operators, building managers, and sell up the chain, we're introduced to CEOs, C-level through the Osmington connection, and then they would recommend us down the chain. We'd still have to get buy-in from building managers and operators and show the value of the technology, but it added a lot of credibility. The other thing that I'd say, and again, this is because you have a bit of a global audience, I'm very proud of being a Canadian clean tech company and coming from this ecosystem. I will say one thing our country does well is foster and support clean technology companies. Absolutely. So we have been the recipient of both provincial and federal innovation funding. It's not easy to get. The diligence on this was, more difficult than the diligence from some of our standard VC and strategic investor funders. But it really helps to create an ecosystem in Canada of clean technology companies. So that's been a huge boost to us as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because listen, you need money, you need inward investment in able to grow a business of any size. But what's more valuable often than just financial investment is contacts, access to a black book, experience in the sector, have maybe previously gone through mistakes, or know people who have been through mistakes to help lead the company that's receiving the investment to make sure they're not, making those same mistakes. So yeah, you say luck, maybe there's a bit of luck, but I imagine there's also a real strategic element to it in order of getting the right people on board from an investment perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Leighton, it's an important point. And considering, again, your startup audience, a lot of it is understanding the path and knowing that there's a path that exists, right? When I first started out, I felt like we were inventing everything. And then when I got more involved in the startup ecosystem, I started to realize that there are milestones, there are gates, there's a well-trodden path that startups typically follow. That gave me a lot more confidence, and also it just kind of reassured me, because there was a map to follow, and I wasn't just inventing things, or my partner and I weren't just inventing things right as we went along. So yes, for the startup audience out there, I urge you to get involved with startup groups, ecosystems, incubators, because you learn a lot from others and the issues that they're facing, and the path that they've gone by before you.
Yeah. Look, what's just I suppose to kind of just finish up on that point, what is encouraging is that I know that the Canadian government are very forward thinking in terms of like these innovation funds and funds that are there to promote like sustainable businesses and green tech, clean tech companies. And you could argue that maybe your kind of North American cousins were a bit lagging behind that, but a lot of we're dealing with many customers and a whole network now based out of New York and other other parts of like the Eastern Seaboard, and it's great to see similar type innovation coming out of some of those big metropolitans as well. And look, it's no secret that in general there's an argument to say that VC funding is starting to slow down on certain things, but green tech, clean tech businesses that are using technology as a force for good, they're bucking the trend and they're still getting inward investment. I think my last thing is it would just be interesting for me to understand, what does the next sort of 6 to 12 months look like then for Peak Power?
Well, we are, I guess, at a growth stage. We're very sales oriented. I'm not sure how big news this was in the UK, but in the US, President Biden signed an Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA it's called, which creates almost $400 billion to support clean technology, including a 30% tax credit for energy storage. This happened a month ago. It created a wonderful improvement in the economics of our technology. Some regions where our economics were marginal got quite a boost because of this, or some regions that were uneconomic now all of a sudden are economic. So for us, we're focused on the US, focused on expansion there. As a Canadian company, the Canadian market is quite small. We do have to focus on US and international expansion. And we have a Series A planned for early 2023, which we hope will bring obviously more investment, but scale up growth for the company. And then we'll start looking to Europe and other regions as well to start to export our technology.
Okay, so post Series A, it's about world domination, starting with the States.
Isn't that what everyone's story is?
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, Matthew, what I will say is it's a really impressive story to date, and you don't need me to tell you this, but it's a really innovative way of attacking an issue that's facing everyone. Like I say, never more so in history than it is right now. So absolutely great timing, and yeah, look, the best of luck with your mission, and I look forward to watching how you guys fare over the next 6 to 12 months.
Thank you very much, Leighton. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Well, good day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.